The lawsuit arrived on a Tuesday, delivered not by mail but by a nervous-looking process server who seemed deeply apologetic to be standing on my gravel driveway. He handed me the crisp, heavy envelope as if it were a live grenade, which, in a way, it was. The document inside was a declaration of war, a meticulously crafted piece of legal aggression aimed at the heart of my quiet existence. The plaintiff was the Sterling Meadows Estates Homeowners Association. I, Elias Vance, was the defendant. And my crime, it seemed, was the very land I stood upon. I live in a small, 200-year-old stone cottage on a single acre of land that was once part of a sprawling apple orchard. My acre, which I call Providence Orchard, is all that remains. It is an island of gnarled ancient trees and rambling stone walls, surrounded by a churning sea of beige stucco and perfectly manicured lawns. This sea is Sterling Meadows, a new and aggressively upscale development that sprang up 5 years ago. I am not a resident. I am an obstruction. My property is a geographical anomaly, a pocket of history they were forced to build around, and the HOA president, a woman named Cynthia Sterling, considered my very presence a personal affront. Cynthia was a woman who believed the world could, and should, be beige. She saw my life's work the careful preservation of this historic homestead not as a noble pursuit, an act of curating the past, but as a stubborn refusal to assimilate. She saw my wildflower meadow as a patch of weeds, my beehives as a dangerous nuisance, and my fieldstone walls, built by hand in the 1840 eds, as a derelict and non-compliant caviller. Fencing material. For 2 years, she had waged a campaign of attrition. It began with polite, passive-aggressive notes left in my mailbox about the rustic aesthetic of my property. I responded with polite, factual letters explaining the historical significance of my land and its legal exemption from her nascent community's bylaws. When politeness failed, she escalated to official-looking violation notices, fining me for the color of my front door, a historically accurate but apparently offensive shade of barn red, and for the unstructured nature of my heirloom apple trees. I ignored them. Now, she had taken the final step. She was suing me. I sat at my heavy oak desk, the same desk my great-great-grandfather had used, and read the lawsuit. As a historical cartographer, a man who spends his days studying the intricate language of deeds, treaties, and ancient land grants, I have a deep respect for the power of the written word. But this document was a perversion of that power. It was 30 pages of carefully constructed nonsense, alleging that my property constituted a visual and environmental nuisance that was actively lowering the property values of Sterling Meadows. It claimed my apple trees dropped leaves onto their pristine sidewalks, that my beehives posed a threat to their residents' children, and that the very existence of my antiquated cottage violated the aesthetic harmony they were legally obligated to maintain. The lawsuit demanded that I dismantle the stone walls, paint my cottage an approved shade of sterling taupe, and submit to a full landscaping review by the HOA's Architectural Committee. It was, in essence, a legal demand for my unconditional surrender, a demand to erase the history I was sworn to protect. Any other person might have felt a surge of panic, a dread of the crushing legal fees and the stress of a protracted court battle. I felt a quiet, cold resolve settle over me.
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.
I felt a quiet, cold resolve settle over me. Cynthia Sterling, in her arrogant ignorance, had mistaken my quiet academic nature for weakness. She thought she could bully me with the brute force of a high-priced lawyer and a blizzard of paper. She believed her authority, minted just 5 years ago, could extinguish a legacy written into the very soil. She didn't know who I was. And more importantly, she had no idea what I carried. My work as a cartographer isn't just about drawing maps. It's about understanding the story of the land, its legal DNA. When I purchased this cottage, I hadn't just done a standard title search. I had spent 6 months in the county archives, tracing the lineage of this property back to its very beginning. I had held the original Dovem, felt the indentations of the quill pen, and read the flowing, beautiful script of the first deed. Cynthia Sterling and her lawyers had clearly only gone back as far as the 1990, when a developer bought the 200-acre farm that surrounded my little plot. They had seen the exemption for my 1-acre homestead, and assumed it was a simple grandfather clause, a minor inconvenience. They had not done their homework. They had not gone back to the beginning. I walked over to the old cast-iron fireproof safe that was bolted to the stone floor in my study. The combination was a series of dates, significant moments in the life of this land. With a soft click, the heavy door swung open. Inside, past my own important documents, was a long, leather tube, its surface cracked and weathered with age. I pulled it out gently, my hands moving with the reverence of a curator handling a sacred text. I unrolled the document on my desk. It was the original 1,848 land grant for the entire 201-acre parcel, signed by the governor of the state. It granted the land to my ancestor, a man named Silas Vance, for the purpose of establishing a family farm. The language was beautiful, full of the flowery, ironclad prose of the 19th century. And in the middle of it, written in the same steady hand, was the covenant. The clause. The single paragraph that Cynthia Sterling's high-priced lawyers had missed. The words that could end it all. It was a reversionary clause, a legal instrument of immense power, rarely used in modern deeds, but common in foundational grants of that era. It was designed to ensure the grantor's original wishes for the land were honored in perpetuity. The clause was clear. The land was granted for the express purpose of maintaining a pastoral and agrarian character, for the raising of crops, the keeping of livestock, and the sustenance of a family homestead. It went on to state, in no uncertain terms, that should the pastoral character of the majority of the tract be fundamentally subverted or abandoned in favor of dense, non-agrarian settlement, the title to the entire 201-acre tract would immediately and automatically revert to the legal heir and current title holder of the original homestead plot lot 1 Bra. I was the legal heir and current title holder of Lot 1A. Cynthia Sterling wasn't just suing a man for living outside her control. She was suing the one person on earth who held the legal power to render her HOA, and the entire multi-million-dollar Sterling Meadows Estates development nothing more than tenants on his land. She thought she was fighting to extinguish a flickering candle of history. She had no idea she was threatening to blow up the entire power plant. I picked up the lawsuit again, a faint smile on my lips. This wasn't going to be a messy fight about the color of my door. This was going to be a quiet, academic lesson in the supreme and enduring power of history. And class was about to be in session. I chose not to hire a lawyer for the courtroom proceedings, though I did consult one to ensure my strategy was sound. He had looked at the 1,848 land grant, read the reversionary clause, and then looked back at me with a mixture of awe and professional terror. "Mr. Vance," he'd said, his voice hushed, "this document, it's a nuke, a fully armed 19th century legal nuclear weapon. Are you sure you want to detonate it in open court?" I had assured him I had no intention of detonating it. I simply wanted to make the other side aware that I was holding the lodge codes. On the day of the hearing, I arrived with a single, elegant leather briefcase. Inside were no legal pads or bulky binders. There was only the original, certified land grant, a series of historically accurate maps I had drafted myself, and a notarized copy of my own deed to Lot 1A. The courtroom was a sterile, modern space that couldn't have been more different from my stone cottage. Cynthia Sterling was there, flanked by 2 lawyers in razor-sharp suits. She sat at the plaintiff's table, radiating an aura of supreme confidence, occasionally whispering to her legal team and laughing softly. She looked at me as I set up my simple collection of documents, a smirk of pity on her face. She saw a lonely eccentric about to be crushed by the wheels of progress. Her lawyer, a man named Harris, presented their case first. He was slick, polished, and spoke with the easy confidence of a man who believed his victory was preordained. He presented a glossy slideshow with high-resolution photos of my property, artfully framed to look as unkempt as possible. He contrasted them with images of the pristine, uniform houses of Sterling Meadows. He spoke of property values, of community cohesion, of the implied social contract I was allegedly violating. "Your Honor," he concluded, his voice resonating with manufactured passion, "my client, the Sterling Meadows HOA, has a duty to protect the investment and quality of life of its residents. Mr. Vance, through his stubborn refusal to adhere to basic community standards, is holding the entire neighborhood hostage. We are simply asking the court to compel him to be a good neighbor." The judge, a thoughtful, no-nonsense woman named Judge Miller, turned to me. "Mr. Vance, you are representing yourself. What is your response to these allegations?" I stood and walked to the podium. I felt a profound sense of calm. I was not a lawyer, but I was a historian. I was not there to argue, I was there to teach. "Your Honor," I began, my voice steady, "Mr. Harris's argument is predicated on a fundamental misunderstanding of the legal and historical context of this land. The dispute over the color of my door or the tidiness culture of my apple trees is irrelevant. The core issue here is one of jurisdiction. The Sterling Meadows HOA believes it has authority over my property. I am here today to demonstrate, with incontrovertible historical evidence, that not only do they have no authority over me, but that their very existence is conditional upon a covenant they have egregiously violated." A flicker of annoyance crossed the face of the HOA's lawyer. Cynthia Sterling rolled her eyes. I unrolled my first map on the presentation board. It showed the county as it was in 1840, a patchwork of large family farms. "This was the valley before Sterling Meadows," I said. "And this," I continued, unveiling a second map from 1850, "is the original 201-acre parcel granted by the state to my ancestor, Silas Vance. And—" I then walked to the judge's bench. "Your Honor, with your permission, I would like to present the foundational document for this entire tract of land. This is the original certified land grant of 1848. I laid the ancient vellum before her. The clerk and the HOA lawyer crowded around to look. The lawyer, Harris, scoffed. "Your Honor, while this is a charming historical artifact, it has no bearing on modern property law and the covenants, conditions, and restrictions filed in 1998. On the contrary," I said Dartran, calmly, "it has every bearing. If you would please direct your attention to the third paragraph, you will find a covenant that runs with the land, a condition placed upon the deed in perpetuity." Judge Miller leaned forward.
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.
Placed upon the deed in perpetuity. Judge Miller leaned forward, reading the elegant script. I recited it from memory. "The land is granted for the express purpose of maintaining a pastoral and agrarian character," I said, my voice filling the silent courtroom. And it further states, "Should any portion of this land be used for dense, non-agrarian settlement, or its pastoral character be fundamentally compromised, title to the entire original tract of land shall revert to the holder of the title of the original homestead, which is Lot 1A. I paused, letting the words sink in. I looked at the judge, then at the HOA's lawyer. "Your Honor, my deed, also certified, confirms that I am the current and sole title holder of Lot 1A. The change in the room was palpable. It was not a sudden explosion, but a slow, dawning horror, like watching a crack spread across a frozen lake. The judge's eyes widened as she grasped the full implication. Harris, the slick lawyer, went pale. He snatched the document and read the clause, his lips moving silently. His face, a moment before so full of arrogant confidence, collapsed into a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. He understood. Cynthia Sterling was still looking confused, tugging on her lawyer's sleeve and whispering, "What does that mean?" Harris turned to her, his expression grim. "It means," he whispered, his voice hoarse, "that his ancestor put a poison pill in the deed. It means that by building Sterling Meadows, we violated the core condition of the original grant. It means that, technically, according to this document, he owns everything. Your house, my house, the whole damn neighborhood." The color drained from Cynthia's face. The woman who had built her identity on absolute control was suddenly facing the prospect of being a tenant on the land of the man she was suing. I addressed the court one last time. "Your Honor, I have not brought this document here today to lay claim to my neighbors' homes. That is not my desire. I live on my property in peace. And I wish only to continue to do so. I have presented this to establish with absolute finality the legal hierarchy at play. The Sterling Meadows HOA does not have authority over me. In fact, the continued CAMPRA existence of Sterling Meadows is, and always has been, subject to the conditions laid down by my ancestors and my continued forbearance. Their lawsuit is not just meritless. It is a profound act of legal and historical ignorance. I ask that you dismiss it." Judge Miller stared at the vellum document, then at the terrified faces of the HOA's counsel, and finally at me. She picked up her gavel. "The plaintiff's case is dismissed with extreme prejudice," she declared, her voice ringing with authority. "Mr. Harris, I am frankly stunned that your firm failed to uncover this in your title search. It is a catastrophic oversight. Mr. Vance, your property is, and shall remain, your own. You are free to go." The gavel fell like a thunderclap. The aftermath was a silent, panicked flurry. The HOA didn't just drop the issue, they went into full damage control. A week later, a delegation from the board pointedly without Cynthia Sterling requested a meeting. They were humble, terrified, and deeply apologetic. They offered me anything I wanted. I asked for only one thing: a new, legally binding covenant to be filed with the county and attached to the HOA's charter, acknowledging my property's complete and total exemption from all past, present, and future bylaws, and establishing a permanent, non-intrusive 10-foot buffer zone around my land. In exchange, I would sign a quitclaim, relinquishing the reversionary right, but only for as long as the new covenant was honored. It was a truce, but on my terms. They agreed immediately. Cynthia Sterling resigned as president and sold her house within 6 months. The new HOA board leaves me entirely alone. They treat my stone walls not as a violation, but as a border wall with a sovereign nation they dare not provoke. Sometimes I sit on my grandfather's stone bench, looking out at the apple trees, the vellum document safe in its fireproof vault. I never wanted to end their world, but I had to remind them that mine was here first, and that the land has a memory that outlasts even the most ambitious plans of men. The quiet hum of history is the only authority I answer to.